We're going to welcome these 4 women to the stage, and they're just kind of going to have a discussion, an unmoderated discussion amongst themselves. And they're going to be talking about the road to resilience, recovery, and sustainability. So I'm going to introduce these women, or I'm going to bring these women on the stage and then let them introduce themselves. So Lorraine, Akiba, if you could join us. Hi Lorraine, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. And then we have Robin Bienfait.
Thank you.
I learned my lesson with Thomas. Thomas, I'm sorry, I mispronounced your last name, so I made sure to ask Robin how to pronounce hers. We have Marianne Berlinski. Hi, Marianne.
Hello.
And last but certainly not least, we have Andre. So, Lorraine, I will let you go ahead and start with a quick introduction of yourself, and then let you ladies follow.
Sure. Aloha, everybody. I am Lorraine Akiba, a commissioner from the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission. I see a lot of familiar friends and faces around the room, a lot of engaged energy stakeholders that have been at past ETS forums, and a lot of new faces too. So I come from a state where we are called the Living Laboratory for the energy of the system of the future, sending postcards from the future. We have in our state 100% renewable energy goal by 2045 for the electric sector. We have our Commission has been recognized for exerting its leadership in 2014 with the White Paper on the Future of Hawaii Utilities, where we've engaged on many things like distributed energy resources, demand response, grid modernization, and community-based renewable energy programs for our customers. So with that, I think that's it.
Yes, I think you're ready.
Oh.
It's not a box.
I'm pretty loud, so
There you go.
Having been a litigator before, I usually know how to project to the back of the courtroom, so this is better. So anyway, I hope you were able to catch some of that. And so I'm here today to share with these other ladies, the dynamic ladies, as we talk about these topics of resiliency, reliability, and sustainability. And I think we've committed in our state to all of those things, and we have some very critical, mission-critical facilities and customers in our state. So I'll yield the floor so we can hear about everybody else's background.
All right, I'm Robin Bienfait, and I am the CEO of a company called Emnovate, which means Embrace Innovation. I'm in my 4th retirement, so I ran AT&T Global Networks and was their Chief Compliance Officer, Environment, Health, and Safety. Then I was the CIO, CTO of software, CISO, and the enterprise business unit and cybersecurity person for BlackBerry. And then I took a job 3 minutes after leaving BlackBerry for Samsung, and I was their Chief Enterprise Innovation Officer. So everything I've had to build over the course of 30 plus years has had to be very resilient and very global in nature. And I'm the person who actually has to work across all the different sectors across all the world to make sure that the power works together, the infrastructure works together, the cyber works together, and that we architect all the way up in each one of the different domains that we can act as one unit. So resilience is a big issue, and cyber is a big issue, and I have learned very quickly that innovation is not happening in the corporation anymore. In fact, 85 to 90% of innovation is happening outside the corporation. And so what I have started is a tech accelerator in Atlanta. I am, of course, in the neighborhood of Georgia Power, and one of my buddies from Georgia Power. So we do things such as taking corporate challenges into our innovators and our engineers and come out of the corporate challenge with understanding how we might change something that you can't do with inside your business.
I am Marianne Berlinski. I am president of EDF. So just in the elevator earlier on the way up here, I was with Ralph, and he introduced each other and said, "You're with EDF?" And he says, "Do you know Frank?" I was like, "Frank? I don't think I know Frank." I said, "The Environmental Defense Fund." I said, No, we're the other EDF. So we're Electricité de France. We often get confused. I know some of my cousins from the other EDF are here, so excited to meet y'all. EDF in North America, I'm responsible for our customer-facing businesses. So our retail, commercial and industrial power and gas teams, our power plant management, group, and then our hedging and optimization around the customer businesses. This is my 4th ETS. Very excited to be here. This is one of my favorite conferences, a very dynamic, energetic group of people. And when I got asked to be on this panel, I was told it was going to be like The Voice, and we were just going to be very dynamic.
The morning view.
And it was gonna,
the morning view. We have our
the
coffee.
view. And so I really wanted to be Whoopi Goldberg. I think this is going to be a lot of fun, and I am excited to be a part of it.
Wow, fantastic. So I'm Andrew Ray, and I'm with the executive with the Electric Power Research Institute. We do research, hardcore research, objective, 501c3, in about 90% of all the generating and transmission capacity in the United States and 30 countries. My history is I've been an executive with the utility for over 30 years, and I'm actually started as a nuclear physicist, worked in transmission fossils, so I feel like I've kind of done the gambit as far as where the utility business is going. So really excited to be here and excited to be part of the transformation of the energy industry, not just electricity, as we see this convergence of all the technologies. And now I think we're going to talk a little bit about resilience and sustainability. And why don't we still go in order? You want to do that, Ryan?
Yeah, I think I was asked to be part of this panel because if you don't know Hawaii's systems, it's 6 islands, separate island grids. There's no interconnection between the islands. So it is very important for each energy ecosystem on the island to balance and also to deal with resiliency and reliability concerns on each island. We are also in the middle of the Pacific, and we can be subject to natural disasters, much like Puerto Rico just experienced. And if that was a direct hit for us, what would we do? So these things have been at top of mind for many years for us. So resiliency and reliability are very important. And because we are an island systems so far away from everybody, help is not a truck roll away. I mean, there's no way somebody from another state can come in and help. It's days, if not weeks, before assistance can come from other utilities. So we definitely have to think differently. And really, we come from a history of sustainability. The ancient Hawaiians were very much practicing sustainability. They were stewards of the land and practiced resource management. So all that is the background we come from. But the reality being that we also house mission-critical energy security facilities for the Department of Defense. So I think that's been a very important part of our thinking. We were given a lot of fame nationally because of, and I think that's why some of the folks from ETS wanted me to address this, and what happens in terms of even when you're potentially facing a devastating geopolitical threat. How does that work into the energy scheme? Well, all the more reason why for our islands, our separate islands, we need to have energy security, reliability, and resiliency. And the way that we've done that is with a combination of distributed energy resources, trying to use customer-sided resources as well as utility-scale resources, and with our renewable push, using solar and storage. And I'm proud to say that in our state, our little rural cooperative, KIUC was the first out of the box to have a fully dispatchable solar and storage peaker plant. It was a project with Tesla. They now have the largest solar and storage facility with AES energy storage, now known as Fluence, in terms of providing a significant amount of 100 megawatt 5-hour duration battery for the peak period. Again, providing that resource. And then most recently, to address resiliency and reliability for national security purposes. People aren't familiar. I mean, we aren't familiar that with our military bases housed on our islands, they are very mission critical, especially for things such as nuclear attacks and missiles that could potentially be incoming. So we have a major facility, Pacific Missile Range facility, that requires 100% reliability and must be able to operate at all times with no glitches. And we're trying to move, of course, to 100% renewable, and the Department of Defense, the Navy, has been an active partner in that. So they have committed with KIUC now to allow on the Navy facility. I think Tom alluded to that. And we also have other projects like this with Hawaiian Electric, our investor-owned utility, in terms of the Pacific Fleet Command microgrid called the Spiders microgrid, which sits on up in Camp Smith in a very strategic area, as well as Joint Base Pearl Harbor, which is another microgrid. So many of our facilities are already microgrids, but with the technology tools that are now available, they are able to stay connected. They are also able to house facilities that help to provide additional renewable energy for our citizens on the islands, and in times of need to be able to provide backup power that may not only just help the base, but also provide some critical crisis management center, essential services for the communities in which they sit. So I think that's a model that I would like to see for the future. I know we were going to talk about microgrids, and I want some of my other dynamic lady leaders here to weigh in on that, because we did want to touch on the thing of microgrids. But I think we're trying to do it in a very sustainable way, and also trying to include energy efficiency, demand response, storage, which we clearly have defined in our jurisdiction as generation resources. So we have tried to clear the path and made a regulatory framework where utilities and customers could benefit by us setting the right tariffs and the right market design. So kind of segueing off of what Tom and Ralph said, I think the reason why Hawaii is acknowledged is because we have gone down this path, and we have, as regulators, tried to reform the way regulators allow cost recovery, the way regulators open the framework so that these innovations can, in fact, take hold in our grids, and we can facilitate and encourage the grid modernization that's required for the resilient and reliable grid of the future.
So I'll turn on that a little bit in that I don't think we're working very well together, and still don't think we're working very well together, not that you're not within your own space. Having recovered 9/11 and recovered Katrina and a number of other storms, you couldn't see 9/11 coming, but you could see the storms coming. And even when we were coordinating between all the different telecoms and power utilities, we were all doing it what I call like a patchwork quilt and pairwise. If I knew you over there, I'd call you on the phone. We didn't have any constructive way to work with each other, except for everybody found my phone number because I was core backbone. And when Stannis Air Force Base went down, we had to roll power in to help Stannis Air Force Base come up. And I also brought in what we call COWS, cells on wheels, and also brought in local drops to the area. We had 163 locations wiped off the face of the earth with Katrina. And you don't replace that overnight, but you have a team standing by outside of it. I saw the horrible failure with FEMA and trying to get facilities to people that were stranded. I was only allowed to take cats and dogs back with me off of helicopters, but we had a lot of people coming to aid. You saw the same thing with Harvey. You didn't plan for Harvey. Harvey hung out for way too long. And then you had to see citizens stepping in. We don't have a good way for our private and public sectors to meet and come together when we do see a storm coming, or have private and public coming together so we can plan for something like a 9/11. With 9/11, I had to get them to do some things that were quite interesting. Let me into the airspace, let me across the bridge. I asked them to let me put the exchange, New York Stock Exchange, back up in Chicago, because that's where the American Exchange is, and to show resiliency in our country, that our stock exchange isn't denoted by New York. It can be anywhere in the United States, and we all stand behind our exchange. No, it had to be in New York. Okay, well, if it has to be in New York, you got to let me across the bridge, or you got to allow me to fly some things in. So we had to put everything plus power in the air with fuel, and land and do everything ourselves from the ground up. There's no cooperation amongst the different units. Power's great, but without all the stuff you need within infrastructure to play along with it, you can't put your infrastructure back to play. So there has to be more collaboration. I went in front of the commission to testify about this, and there's still nothing being done. So I've made the decision to step outside of the corporation and try to stir things up in the outside, in the innovation space. And maybe someday we'll just disrupt the grids and build something else that just takes over instead. because apparently within the corporation we're not making those changes. So I'm just being a little controversial.
You are being a little controversial.
Can't wait.
Come
Okay,
on.
come at it, ladies. Come at it. Come on.
So I'm going to pile on a little bit of what Lorraine and Robin, 2 points, islands and Harvey. How many Houstonians do we have in the audience? So yeah, a lot of you we're probably just starting to get over our shell shock or post-traumatic stress of dealing with Harvey. And I think interesting thing for us is Texas is a really big island. We are not synchronized with the rest of the country. So we did have some unique challenges in that. And Harvey, 51 inches of rain. It was biblical. 150,000 homes, 160,000 apartments, 500,000 vehicles, which you can still see on the road between here and Houston. 88 deaths. I mean, it was a storm of storms. And I think there are 3 things that I look at of successes from an industry, of things that we did well. Now, there are plenty of things we could do better, but the communications, I think using, at EDF we had emergency alert texting systems, phone trees, emails. I mean, we just said we're going to make sure we need to do a little bit of everything. And because of the morning calls we had where the supervisors were all getting in and a head count of where are our employees, we all knew how many people were impacted. At EDF, in our Houston office, we had 35 families displaced, most of whom lost everything. But we knew that, and we knew where our people were and who needed homes and how we had people going in with boats to get folks out, and it was really, in a terrible time, you really saw the best of what people can do. So communication systems are important because your crisis management plan is only as good as the communication system that delivers it. And the companies that did well during Harvey had an effective communication plan. Mentioned leadership, having people stand up and make decisions and figure out how to handle it, because there are a lot of unknowns in that time, and it's you don't want a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking, but you need people to make decisions with the best data they have available. And then the third thing was employee support. My 3 boys and I and my husband got out. We were on the mucking crew of 2 different homes, get in there. It was amazing how helping employees made everybody feel better about the situation. Our home was okay. I thought it was great, though, for my 3 boys to get out there and tear down sheetrock and pull out wet carpet and really help people remember what was important. So, resiliency, sustainability, recovery in an energy industry is really, really important to have all 3. And when we do have these big weather events, we do get to see what's working and where do we need to continue to improve.
That's great. And I think I want to bring this home just a little bit, because as a utility person, we've all talked about the technology, and I'm going to get to that, but let's just bring it home. Gosh darn, having a system that's not resilient is just darn inconvenient. No grocery stores don't have water, the restaurants' food spoiling, the gas pumps don't work, goodness gracious, you can't use a teller machine because they use electricity. No, it's not inconvenient. It's personal. Let me tell you about Jessica Sanchez. Jessica Sanchez is 22 years old, comes back to her home. I live in Florida. I couldn't get home. She gets back to home after the aftermath of Irma. Her house is partially destroyed, no water, no electricity, so she cooks in the yard. It's 90 degrees and rising. You can cut the humidity with a knife. And at night she sleeps in her car with her husband and her 2-year-old. And that's what every single person in the utility business, they know, that's what they're thinking of. It's not thinking of how much money did we spend on these smart meters. It's about the people every day that's personal. So what are we doing about it? What are we doing for technology? What are the utilities doing? What are innovators doing, and technology providers and policymakers? And we don't mean to always pick on the regulator there, Lorraine.
Well, I think I think some of that is justly deserved. I mean, to the extent regulators don't want to think outside the box and don't want to embrace the change themselves. And we just came from the World Forum on Energy Regulation. Right. That was the topic for regulators. How do we regulate in a time of innovation and disruption and transformation? And how do we make that a positive thing for folks, knowing that we're dealing with a lot of external factors like extreme weather, like climate change, that are putting a strain on existing resources and facilities that are either need to be replaced, and infrastructure that is way beyond its useful life. So these are real issues. And so I think that, regulators have a role to play in this in terms of setting the right framework and then allowing, for example, one concrete example that we learned from Hurricane Sandy was when there was a lot of rooftop PV in New Jersey and New York. But when the system went down, because the rules weren't in place, because the technical requirements weren't in place, those inverters tripped off. They were worthless. They couldn't be, they couldn't service the buildings and facilities and homes that they were at, and they couldn't add to the recovery effort. We learned from that now, and so across the country, and IEEE standards and the technical requirements, and I know that EPRI and applied research and all the folks, the grid edge folks that are innovators, that are demand response aggregators, that have power control systems, that now they're in the inverters, the smart inverters that have reactive power, the smart power control systems and the storage themselves that can provide types of services that we never even thought possible, and that also can help us in a situation like a natural disaster, whether it's rain or a hurricane or a tsunami. Hopefully it won't impact your entire island, but our thought being that if we have integrated energy districts, which is what we call microgrids or mini grids, depending on what country you live in, these can then island off, and we can have pockets and areas where we can have critical essential services, have water, food, telecom. People can come for gasoline. They can come for essential services, and we have to plan that. So part of our job as regulators and government agencies, and it's not just the commissioners that regulate utilities, it's other agencies. We must work together to have a plan. And in our state, because of the unique situation we have, but facing both geopolitical threats as well as natural disaster threats, we do have on the major island of Oahu an Office of Climate Change, Resiliency, and Sustainability that is doing this very thing that you talked about, trying to get everybody together, trying to communicate, trying to have plans, working with the state. There's also a state Office of Resiliency. That's a little bit more nascent, but trying to get off the ground to do the same thing. So it is important at all different levels. It's not just the utilities problem. It's government, it's regulators, it's also the technology community that can provide the toolkit and the solution set. We all have to collaborate and work together, so I do agree with that.
So let's eat this elephant one bite at a time, because she's obviously excited. She's naming all these things, and I'm going to test you all on everything that she mentioned. I think it's fantastic. But let's break down this resiliency into 3 areas. You got to harden and protect, right? And we've been focusing on storms, and we've got the technology for underground cables, different kind of poles, using drones to do vegetation management. But guys, it's not all, and women, it's not all about storms. We've got to have protection from electromagnetic pulse. We've got to have protection from cybersecurity.
So I'm flying in this morning from Atlanta, and as I'm going into the airport at 5:30 this morning, across the radio at the city of Atlanta was dealing with a ransomware attack. And if you take a look at any of your infrastructure, and you guys all know what your infrastructure looks like, it's pretty pitiful in most cases from a digital or a cyber perspective. Where do you think that ransomware attack is going? Where do you think the next cyber attack is going? We're very, very vulnerable. And we all need to kind of hyper up, kind of like you did, and go and attack what your plan is. At least put your scenarios together. If this isn't working, what are you going to do next? If this isn't working, what are you going to do next? And then go out and test it. So, when we're recovering things, you get this phone call, somebody says, Robin, we really need some diesel. Okay, I'll send you a truck. I'm not worried at that point in time that they're going to pay me back. I wouldn't even know how to take a check from them at that point in time. I said on the phone to them, I said, I'm bringing you a diesel truck, and they go kind of quiet. I said, do you have anything to put it in? And they kind of get quiet. I said, okay, I'll bring you something to put it in. Then I said, well, do you have a pump? This is their facility. So this is just typical. You're thinking, okay, you saw the storm coming, and you don't even have the next stage of plan. At least have a plan. At least test a plan. If anything, it'll make you more resilient when something else happens that's not maybe the same thing, but you've gone at least through some scenarios and you know what you can and cannot do. I think we're all sitting in a very vulnerable state right now.
We really are. So that's kind of the hardening part. And you got into the recovery and response. That's the next stage. And it's more than just having the manpower and the equipment, although really critical. Prioritizing who's going to get the power first. Oh, Lord have mercy if that's not controversial. But it's got to be the transmission lines. Got to be critical infrastructure, police, hospital, fire department. Got to be next after that.
I had to bring generators to the jail.
Yeah,
that's an interesting thing to do. Talk
one.
a few people into that.
Got to have the supplies, medicine, pharmacies, groceries, and then so on and so on. And so one of the ways to recover and respond, and I know you worked on this a lot, you've got to have the data. That's where the smart meters and the inverters.
Exactly.
And you get these terabytes of data. What are you going to do with it? Data analytics.
Right.
You know what? We're moved beyond that. It's beyond getting terabytes of information for knowledge. We need insights. And now we're using AI, artificial intelligence, to help identify individual customers. How do you get the response faster, get the supplies? Now, you worked a little bit on the recovery and response.
We did, and you mentioned drones, which were very important. So petrochemical, we serve a lot of the refineries, chem plants, manufacturing, breweries in Houston, and for a lot of the petrochemical, it was figuring out, at what point had the water receded where it was safe to send people in, and the drone data alone from that exercise was remarkable in speeding up how you could prioritize where to send the crews. So it is. I think the technology is certainly pushing us. We have to be smart enough to realize where to take that data.
In terms of, in Hawaii, where you have a lot of the innovation and entrepreneurial companies, and funded by many of the accelerators and applied research of contributions of some of the utilities across the country, and EPRI is included in that too. But I think it is really important as we look at these tools and machine-to-machine learning, new platforms, algorithms, and yet we have to balance that with the cyber concerns, because those are ways that clever cyber threat actors.
You're just making the path for cyber faster.
But yet these are the tools that will help us to be able to have ability to, from machine to machine, from operational centers, to have real-time data, to be able to know, have the eyes into the system and know what is able to be brought up or what islanded off when they got the signal, where are there still communities that are working, that we now can use those as the heart of the ecosystem, and then we can bring that back up from those centers. And it is a plan. I have to say it is in our state, and maybe we are ahead because we realize how dire the circumstances are. We have been through hurricanes that have direct passes, and we have seen how long it takes for recovery to happen. You're seeing that now in Puerto Rico. We can't be that way. So we need to work together, planning, hardening, future thinking, utilizing all the right technology as it comes off from the innovators, and being aware of the cyber threats. And that's like juggling all those balls in the air. So how do you do that?
And I hope you heard one of the things that Lorraine was saying when she talked about the communities and building out. Two things really emerged that hit home for all of us that were going through this, and that's the integratedness of all the infrastructure. You think that you have an emergency plan, I got to get the power up, but if your communication system's not working, not only can't you communicate with the data, you can't communicate with workers, the public feels alone, they don't know that anybody's working on their system, so that whole communication and the water and the power are now part of an integrated resiliency and critical system. But the part that you mentioned I thought was fascinating is something that's really coming out now. People used to think, as we have edge of the grid generation, that it's them against the utility. It's the self-generating against the utility. It's the microgrid against. It's not. And we're seeing now that there's actually mutual benefits, maybe a mutual sharing of cost. And I love what you said about you can begin to build out on those microgrids, and they can also provide ancillary services, frequency control to the grid.
Yeah, but it's a lot of the things that you're building that other people probably should learn from.
Yes, absolutely. All right, let me just wrap up with a quick little story. I want, when we talk about resiliency, I want to introduce you to Ramon Sandiego. He doesn't speak much English. He's at the Lowe's in Orlando. The hurricanes passed, and he has the last generator. And the woman behind him is just going crazy. She's anxious, she's upset. He doesn't know what she's saying. And so he gives her the generator. And he walks out of Lowe's empty. And it wasn't until the next day when someone said, Ramon, you need to check CNN. And on CNN, his Lowe's camera is taking a picture of this man. Pam Breck, who is the woman, her father has conjunctive heart failure and needed the generator in order to provide the oxygen tank at night so he could get enough oxygen. And when they said, Ramon, what do you think? What a nice guy. He says, oh, I think God had a hand in this. I think we're here to help each other. And I hope when this hurricane passes, we remember the feelings we have today. And so I'm going to leave this with you on resiliency, that we've got a lot to do on the resiliency of the system, on the communications, infrastructure, energy. There's a lot that binds our community together we got to work on. But we also got to work on the resiliency of lives and helping each other be more resilient in the storms of life. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you for the panel.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.